Video games have the power to tell amazing stories. Sometimes those stories are just too big to fit into a single game, so it's up to the sequels to tie up those loose ends. Unfortunately, there are also too many times when these sequels will never come, leaving fans in the lurch with cliffhangers that will never, ever be resolved. Days Gone. I'll admit I'm afraid of many things, but hordes of zombies that climb over each other like ocean waves is way up there. That's why Days Gone is simultaneously one of my favorites and least favorite games from the PS4 era. The mix of zombier, freakier action, open-world gameplay, and enthralling story had me screaming my way through the game all the way to the end credits. The game has 4 endings, but it's the super secret ending that got me the most excited. In it, the character O'Brien reveals that the freaker virus is mutating, allowing the infected to retain their intelligence on top of being super strong, super fast, and super scary. How does he know this? Well, he just happens to be the first of this new kind of freaker, and he has been for the entire game. He only reveals this information to you by taking off his hazmat helmet after 65 hours of game. What the heck? O'Brien, come on, there's hiding a bite and there's hiding that. That's right, you only get to see O'Brien's creepy pale skin and 25-foot vertical leap after you do absolutely everything there is to do in Days Gone. It's okay though, because that awesome secret ending got me pumped to take on even scarier freakers in Days Gone 2. Unfortunately, that is a game that will probably never happen. Sony turned down a pitch for the Days Gone sequel in 2019, probably because it didn't sell or review nearly as well as The Last of Us. Force Unleashed 2. Star Wars! Oh, we love a good Star Wars action-adventure game, and wait a minute, this guy looks awfully familiar. I just can't put my finger on it. Anyways, Star Wars The Force Unleashed set the standard for how Force power should be portrayed in, well, everything. And its sequel took what made the game special and dialed it up to 11. I definitely have some quibbles with the story, but pulling a Star Destroyer out of the sky made up for all those problems. At the end of the adventure, The Force Unleashed 2 has 2 endings, a dark side ending and a light side ending. In the dark side ending, a perfect evil clone of Starkiller kills the protagonist Starkiller, who is also a clone by the way, and then is sent by Darth Vader to hunt down the rest of the Jedi. In the light side ending, the good Starkiller captures Darth Vader and blasts off to have more adventures with Juno Eclipse while Boba Fett stalks them. No matter which path would be considered canon, the places the story could go were limitless. It was unlike anything Star Wars had ever done before, like a Star Wars What If series, which, now that I think about it, would be like a really cool idea, so Disney, if you're listening, like, please. But man, 2 awesome possible paths for this awesome series to go. I wonder where it's gonna go next. Right, nowhere. Nothing, because nothing happens next, because The Force Unleashed 3 got canceled, so the Starkiller saga has existed like Schrodinger's cat in a box of narrative uncertainty for 13 years. At least The Force Unleashed 2 got some DLC, where evil Starkiller kills Han and Chewie, and also Leia, who became a full-on Jedi. Too Human. Too Human was an ambitious action RPG created by Silicon Knights, the studio behind bangers like Blood Omen, Legacy of Kain, Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem, and Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snake. With Too Human, they created an original world and storyline that was supposed to be the next blockbuster gaming franchise. It took place in a universe that mashed up science fiction and Norse mythology. It was marketed as an epic story that would be told over a trilogy of games. Unfortunately, the game was probably too ambitious. It was trapped in development hell for almost a decade, and it didn't exactly light the world on fire when it finally released on the Xbox 360 in 2008. Unfortunately, that meant the game's initial cliffhanger ending, which was meant to be resolved by 2 more installments, just left us hanging off the cliff indefinitely. I mean, after a seemingly ordinary mission, the player character Baldur gets a nice chat with his family, storms off, and then fade to black. So, like, that's it? That was the ending? They were so sure they would get to have their trilogy, and it just didn't happen. But I mean, hey, presenting Norse gods as cybernetically enhanced humans was a really cool idea. It still is. I'd still love to see that. Telltale's Game of Thrones. People who liked video games and choose-your-own-adventure books ate pretty well throughout the majority of the 2010s, and that's all thanks to Telltale Games. They made a name for themselves with Telltale's The Walking Dead, but they also lent their expertise to a number of other wildly popular franchises, including Batman, Borderlands, and Game of Thrones. You see, while Batman and The Walking Dead got several seasons worth of games to expand and tell their stories, Game of Thrones was not so lucky. It wrapped up its first slate of 6 episodes, but when the time came to start producing the sequel season, Telltale went through a bit of a rough patch. The studio ended up shutting down, and whatever they had planned for their Game of Thrones story was lost when the project was canceled. The story followed the various family members of House Forrester as they tried to save their family and their coveted ironwood trees, each in their own way. Pretty much every storyline ended with a dreaded "to be continued," unless it is they died, since no coming back from that, and left you on another little cliffhanger of like, oh shoot, that plan failed, hopefully this other one works out. So, whether it was north of the Wall with the North Grove, the aftermath of the Battle of Ironrath, or the political dealings in King's Landing, unfortunately though, I guess we'll never find out what happens, or whether this was all doomed to fail. Prince of Persia 2008. Experimental Ubisoft games are some of my very favorites. Heck, Assassin's Creed was one of their experimental games at the time. And 2008's Prince of Persia reboot sits safely on top of that list. It took a big risk of completely changing everything we knew about the franchise up to that point, from who the prince was, to how he played, and finally to the world he lived in. The one-on-one fights and refreshing art style were enough to set it apart from its predecessors. Prince of Persia's 2008's dedication to being different and unique in its time carried all the way through the end of the game, which was far less hopeful and optimistic than you might assume given its bright and colorful presentation. In the game's emotional conclusion, the prince condemns the world to a dark fate. He cuts down the Tree of Time, the very same tree you spend the entire game cleansing, to resurrect Elika once more. Oh, the things we do for love. That action, the evil Ahrima is released again, with nothing in his way to stop him from plaguing the world. And that's where the game just ends. Ubisoft has all but abandoned this version of Prince of Persia, even going so far as to make another installment in the Sands of Time series immediately after it. Of all of these cliffhangers, this one hurt the most. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown looks really cool though. Outriders is a third-person looter shooter created by the awesome devs at People Can Fly, the co-developers of Fortnite's Save the World campaign and Bulletstorm. The game was positioned as a big new IP for Square Enix, and it definitely had the chops to become that. With awesome action, a cool story, and plenty of loot, I was definitely hooked in and ready to take on whatever the planet of Enoch had to throw at me, which, as it turns out, was quite a lot. After 60 hours of Outriders and another 20 for its amped-up World Slayer expansion, I was excited to see where People Can Fly could take this new series next, especially considering the ramifications of the actual ending of World Slayer. You see, the Anomaly has been a big pain in the butt for the Outriders, and their history with the native pack civilization was not great. So much so that they are all pretty much gone, but you were able to create a safe zone for people away from the Anomaly. Shockingly, you also discovered that the packs had foretold your arrival and built an army ready to defeat you. Just, their calculations were off by 1,000 years. A little early there, guys, but hey, they're still ready and waiting to take you on. That's an exciting setup for a sequel if I'd ever heard one. An army ready to stop you, 1,000 years to get ready. But we're probably never going to get one. For all of its exciting gameplay and lore and the beautiful story and graphics, Outriders never managed to turn a profit, so any sequel plans for it have been put on hold indefinitely. It only came out a few years ago, so there might be some hope yet for some Outriders lore, but I wouldn't hold my breath. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you'd like to appear at the end of our video like these awesome friends, you can join our Patreon at the link in the description. Also, if you have a favorite cliffhanger of a story that will sadly never get told, please let us know in the comments.